How's everyone feeling?
Good.
Good? Woo! Excellent. Do we need to introduce ourselves? Yeah, why not? Marie? Tell everyone who you are.
I feel I know at least 50% of the room in here. Marie Daniels, I currently work for Alcon, but I've worked with Nat at Novartis. I worked at AbbVie before that, and before I went to Alcon, I was at Bayer with Eduardo, who I can see somewhere in the room there. And I've worked in learning and development for quite a long time. Dave?
Thanks, Marie. Yeah, similar journey to Marie. I've been in learning and capability development for a long time. I literally finished up at J&J on Friday, and then on Monday started my next chapter with my partner in crime, Matt Britland, and some of you may have seen us in the trade display area. So I'm now with Edge Medical Solutions. So let's jump in and talk about the power of aggregated marginal gains.
So Steve has been telling me that this is a hot topic, capability. And for those of you who believe everything that may or may not come out of the World Economic Forum, the current data from them says around 39% of skills is going to change for the workforce over from 2025 to 2030. So that's 40% of our skills are going to be impacted, not necessarily obsolete, but they're evolving. And we know that. We've heard plenty from AI yesterday. So Dave, what does the power of aggregated marginal gains mean to you in relation to capability uplift in the pharma industry?
Yeah, thanks, Marie. So I think I'll start by telling you a quick story about where the concept of aggregated marginal gains came from, because unfortunately it didn't come from me. Unfortunately, I haven't written a best-selling book about it, and unfortunately I'm not just traveling the world doing keynote talks about it. It did come from a very, very intelligent guy by the name of Sir Dave Brailsford. And he is an exercise and sports scientist who was taken on by Sky Racing, which was the British professional cycling team back in 2003. And when he came on board, they actually asked him, what do you plan to do to help lift the success of the British cycling team? Because up until then, the British cycling team had only ever won a single gold medal, which they had won in 1910 or thereabouts. In fact, their performances had been so dire that apparently many bike manufacturers and manufacturers of cycling, clothing and apparel didn't want to sponsor the team because they didn't want their brand associated with the British cycling team. So he came on board and he brought in this concept of aggregated marginal gain, which is where he peeled back all the micro behaviours that were needed in order to drive success within a cycling team, right down to, what are our tyres made of? Can we use lighter materials so that, there's less friction, less weight on the bike, less friction on the road? Looked at the saddles. How can we make the saddles more comfortable for riders? Obviously, the typical things like nutrition, training programs, all of that stuff. Back in 2003, they started wearing biofeedback, gadgets so that they could pick up on heart rate changes, all of that kind of biometric stuff. So anyway, by 2008, the 2008 Olympics, they won 2 gold medals. By 2012, they had won 70% of the available gold medals in the cycling sport at the Olympics. And they had also won, at that stage, 3 Tour de France's in a period of 4 years. So he absolutely changed the paradigm of what success was all about. And since then, that concept of aggregated marginal gains was then taken into the business arena and has been applied. Now, when we think of the pharmaceutical industry and we think of success, we focus a lot on what we want to achieve, the goals. We have sales targets, we have, medical targets, all of these targets, but what we often don't give enough, attention to are breaking down what are the specific activities and more particularly the behaviours that each person needs to engage in every day in order to get that result. So even if you look at something really simple like a call rate, we all know that we need to have field-based metrics. You cannot run an organisation without metrics. So we have call rates. So I'm just expected to make this many calls a day. But you can break that down to, but what's the anatomy and physiology of a call? Because in order to achieve a call rate, I have to make an appointment. What are the behaviours I need to do to get the appointment? I might need to send an email. Could you make your email 1% better? Could you make your phone call to the clinic or the hospital 1% better? When you're in the call, or before the call, could you make your pre-call planning 1% better? Could you make your conversation 1% better? The questions 1% better? And it's all of these little behaviours which become habits. So James Clear, who wrote a book called Atomic Habits, which I would suggest everyone read because it is just a cracking good read, talks about the fact that we need systems and processes and habitual behaviours. And if we can get those things right, then we'll start seeing the results. The sales figures will take care of themselves. So what it means, coming back to your question, Marie, because I think I may have sort of got a little bit sidetracked, so just wheel me back, is that when you think of learning and capability development in large organisations, everyone wants training, everyone likes the concept of coaching, but we all get caught up in the day-to-day to-do list that we have. So L&D often becomes this, okay, we're having our mid-cycle meeting, we'll do a bit of L&D. We're having our kick-off conference for the year, we'll do a bit of L&D. So we have this sort of short serotonin punch of, motivation, clapping, cheering, hey, I learned a bit, hey, that was really fascinating. But then you leave the room and it's like, well, what did you do with it? What's actually happened? It becomes learning scrap. Within 72 hours, that great training and education you got just goes to dust. And so we need to be better as organisations at thinking, how can we start improving our learning so it just becomes small little 1% bits of learning, which is then followed up by really, really good coaching. Because the coaching is the embedding of the behaviour to hopefully drive a habit which drives a result. And that's where we really need to rethink in the industry how L&D is done. I'll give you a quick example, if that's okay. So when I was at J&J, I was really privileged that most of what I did was capability and career development coaching, where I helped to sort of help develop the competency, and I was working specifically in medical affairs. So help build a medical affairs capability and competency framework, and then from there, work out where does everyone sit in terms of the key skills and behaviours that they need for their role. Then let's pair it back to what do people actually want to achieve with their life? What do you want to achieve with your career? Like, you don't just come in to do to-do lists. You come into work because you're trying to build a career which is linked to a passion, which is linked to your life. So I started this coaching program where we'd pair it right back to go, what's your career vision? Let's start with your vision of what you want. Then let's look at what skills you'll need in order to realise that vision. And then let's map that back to the competency framework so we can get you really engaged in what you're doing each day, which is developing you firstly as a person, and secondly, developing you as a team member and part of an organisation where we're trying to drive positive culture. Now, each month I would let everyone book in well, it wasn't even just month. I said, you can book in with me anytime I've got availability in my calendar, and I'm here as your personal capability and career development coach. And it ended up turning into life coaching. Like I built this really nice comprehensive coaching guide, and then I thought, you know what? Why, if you want to be the best version of yourself, you've got to be healthy. If you want to achieve all this stuff and build your professional competencies, you've got to be healthy first. So we put in there a health and wellness coaching element to it, and it basically became a life coaching program. But coaching is all about 1% marginal gains because humans are hardwired for habit. We talk about AI, you mentioned it before, Marie. Technology just goes at a fever pitch speed. But the problem is the human beings that have to implement that technology move like snails when it comes to behaviour change because we are hardwired for habit and most of us don't like change unless it's absolutely necessary. So the whole concept of learning and capability development should be working with individuals to help make very small change consistently over time, which is your 1%ers. And I think in Dave Brailsford's work, it talks about that if you could get 1% better every day, by the end of the year, you'd be 37 times better. And one of the things he said was, but let's be realistic, you're not going to get 1% better every day because we all procrastinate, we all get lazy, we all have couldn't be bothered days. But if you pair it back to, if you were just going to make your behaviours 1% better between Monday to Friday, you have weekend off to be lazy, and you did that 46 weeks a year, so you've got, 6 weeks off where you can holiday and just do nothing. You're still going to get 10 times better with your behaviours. So in terms of Pharma, let's start thinking about how we can help each other just get 1% better in the small things, which over time will accumulate. And then we need leaders who are really engaged coaches to drive the behaviour change which leads to those habits. So that's what it means to me. I hope that answered your question.
I think that does, Dave.
That was way too much talking. Okay, Marie. Oops. Marie, why is the concept of aggregated marginal gain so critical in helping managers and individuals drive professional skill development?
So you've heard from Dave about this 1%, and you heard him speak about, they looked at some of the macro and micro things that they could do with the cycling team to really increase their winning rate. I've got an old quote. Some of you who know me well might have seen me use this a few times. Most of us do not like mosquitoes. And there's a great quote from the founder of the Body Shop from the UK. And she says, whoever says small things don't make a difference, try sleeping in the same room as a mosquito. My thing is we don't find our mosquitoes. I actually think we're quite good at naming our big buckets of performance things, like call rates, like handling barriers for the sales force and for medical. What we neglect are some of those micro things that can have that big impact of the mosquito. So it's important, and Dave and I have talked about a lot about this, about naming what are the behaviours. But as we heard yesterday, beliefs, and this is a bit of a chicken and egg, we had a nice conversation last night. I really believe that when we're talking about behaviours, and we talk about it so much, and we talk about why do we need to do this, like we're adopting a new digital platform for data. What we often neglect is to map out those, you might call them behavioural traits, but the mindset piece, the beliefs that drive those behaviours. And sometimes we kind of allude to it when we're doing the what's in it for me, and you might write a script, if you're me, for your senior leader, and they get up and speak to that. But what they don't always articulate is the beliefs that will really drive those behaviours, and particularly for those micro skills part. So that concept of marginal gains, my other bugbear with this is we talk about training. I'm going to be controversial. I don't like the word training. Why don't I like it? Because we all think about events, yeah? Most of us, when we talk about training, we think about events. And for those of you, I can see Eduardo smiling, I say, training is really important, particularly with sales teams, because we drive engagement and it powers, and you've got that momentum within the room. But as Dave said earlier, you go to a training event, so don't ask for a show of hands, but just think, most of us have been on 2 or 3 or 4 day or even 5-day courses. 2 weeks later, have you implemented, let's say, 70% of those skills? Are you proficient in 70%? The answer is no. So when we talk about training, our mindset is just programmed, our lizard brains are active, and we think about the events. Training is the bit in the middle. All of the other things, Dave's already talked about some of them, that regular coaching. But we know that working together in cohorts, working in small groups, really helps drive that momentum. So I don't actually like the word training or capability. I think we should be talking more about performance, because that's what it's about. Performance will drive the outcomes. So I was told we can be controversial. I think we need to be talking more about what is the performance we want, and then what are the things. Training is part of it, don't get me wrong, but we over-focus on that. So that, for me, is why it's so important. We're looking at these incremental gains. We employ intelligent people, so that knowledge transfer should be easy, yeah? But it's the behavior change that goes together with the skill and that long-term capability that will give you the marginal gains that will drive your performance, that will enable us all to achieve impact on patients, but also our sales results.
Very good.
Anything to add, Dave?
No, I think you've covered that really well.
So Dave, many people in the room are people leaders. If you're not a people leader, you still are an individual and you contribute to your team. How can people leaders and others in the room bring this concept of aggregated marginal gains to life in their organisations? And I've got some more to say about this too.
Excellent. Let's just talk people leaders. Every single person is a people leader because we're all leading ourselves. So we are all people leaders. I was having a chat to Dave Henderson earlier about culture. And, often in organisations we talk about, we've got to improve the culture, as though someone's got a culture wand that they can come out and wave and, suddenly we've got great culture. We all are the culture of an organisation as individuals. So in terms of what do we need to do to drive this, I'm a firm believer you've got to have systems in place. So for aggregated marginal gains when it comes to capability and career development, everyone has to have a plan in place before anything can happen. If you don't have a plan in place, nothing's going to happen because it'll just become words that get lost. Who in the room has ever experienced, you don't have to show your hands, but just laugh, if you've ever been in a situation where you've start of the year, everyone's got to get their goals into the HR system, and it's suddenly got to be in there by this date, as though, oh my God, if I miss that date, my life for the rest of the year is just, I've failed. I'll come back next year. And so everyone's rushing to get these half-baked kind of sentences into an HR system for lock-off. Has anyone ever experienced that? Just laugh or nod. Yeah, I've experienced that. Have you then experienced it, you've never actually looked at it until mid-year when it mysteriously opens up again and you can go in and sort of take those half-baked sentences that you didn't really understand what you had said, and then you've got to adjust them for the second half of the year. And you have to do it before this date, otherwise the world will end, and then you don't look at them again until about the 30th of November, when suddenly you're going to have a performance review with your manager next week and you've completely forgotten what you've done this year, except that you've been really busy. Anyone relate to that? Yeah. And it's crazy, isn't it, right? We all know it's crazy, yet we do it. So what I would suggest is that we start thinking about creating a plan that we catch up either with your manager, or it could just be an accountability buddy. and you catch up once a month and you talk about what you've done in the last 4 weeks to move towards that goal. Star examples. Who hates job interview star examples? No, Dave, tell me about a time when you... Oh, no, my heart sinks. But when you get good at creating star examples, it's actually really empowering because you're learning how to tell a story about yourself. You're learning how to explain to people why you think the way you think and why that thinking leads to behaviours which leads to success. So what I started doing with the monthly coaching sessions was every month I would help the person get them to craft out a star example of something they had done in the previous 4 weeks which spoke to the competency that they were working on, which was linked to a business goal or objective. So that by September, they had about 8 really good star examples that they could take into an end-of-year performance review, and it eliminates imposter syndrome immediately. Because I'm not an imposter, because I did it. That's what I actually did. And so having an accountability buddy or a really good, whether it's your manager, whether it's an L&D coach, it doesn't matter who it is, but you've got to take the time each month to carve out for yourself an hour where you can self-reflect on the great things you've done, but also write it down. But you've got to write it down in situation. What was the situation? I usually say the situation, word it like it's a problem statement. The problem I had was this. That was a situation. The task was I had to solve the problem. So the task is I was given the role of doing X, Y, and Z. What were the specific actions you took? And then what was the result? Now, once you get good at understanding how to craft STAR, that becomes your personal storytelling framework. And it's absolutely brilliant, not just for job interviews, just for team meetings. Guys, conversation's getting a bit sidetracked. Can we just STAR this? Let's get back to what's the actual problem we're trying to address, task, action, result. So you need to have an individual development plan. You need to carve out time each month for coaching. You need to do some self-paced learning. I started doing a monthly or bi-monthly book club where I'd use AI to help summarise a book, like this brilliant book called High Performance Habits by Brendan Burchard. And then I'd get people online and we'd do a book review. And I'd send out pre-work, so I'd send out the pre-reading, and then we'd come to the workshop and talk about the great stuff that these incredible authors are putting out in the world. And then we'd say, so let's take a concept and bring it back to you and your life. How can you apply that concept at work? And more importantly, how can you apply it at home so that you're bringing a better version of yourself to work and you're bringing a better version of yourself to your friends and family? Learning and development has to be intentional and it's got to be purposeful. You've got to actually do stuff. And so you've got to have the plan. You've got to have monthly coaching where you get together to create your STAR examples. You've got to do self-paced learning. And if you start doing that, you'll start to see results. And then when you start to see results, all those metrics that a lot of people can get quite anxious about disappear. Because your behaviours are the one thing that you are in control of. You can't control a number, an arbitrary number that someone in the organisation has created. The only thing you can control is you and your behaviours. And if you can do that, you will start to eliminate anxiety. Because the more empowered we feel about our own ability to drive our own performance, the less we have to worry about things that haven't happened yet. Which is what anxiety is. I'm worrying about things that haven't actually happened. Whereas if I just become mindful and concern myself with the things I can do right here and right now, I'm going to start performing better, coming back to your point, Maria, about performance, and you'll start to see those numbers, those metrics improve. And I think we are kind of at time. So I'll hand back to you, Maria, for last words.
For leaders is storytelling. I know most of the time leaders top and tail things, but it's a journey. So leading with storytelling and underpinning that with the beliefs that will drive those behaviours. And the two other things is curiosity. We talk about development, but it's curiosity that drives performance. So as a leader, do you model that? Do you create the environment for curiosity? And lastly, retrospectives. For my former colleagues, Bayer, have now turned to working agile. Retrospectives are ingrained in that. You don't need to be agile to do that. If you're doing it monthly, if you're doing it quarterly, however frequently, those retrospectives are such a valuable opportunity for people to learn. And we know that self-reflection is a real opportunity, and it drives self-efficacy. And progression, if people can see their progression, there's lots of research about Harvard about how it makes people feel, and if they feel positively, it drives performance and engagement. And we need to keep our engagement scores up to keep our performance up.